This is Autoline Daily, the show dedicated to enthusiasts of the global automotive industry. Rivian just bought itself another year of survival. About 2 weeks ago, we dug into Rivian's financials to find that it has $7.8 billion in the bank, but that it spent $3.7 billion last year, which means it would run out of cash in just over 2 years at its current rate. However, Rivian announced that it's delaying its all-new plant in Georgia, which is going to save it $2.25 billion. Instead, it's going to build its new models at its current U.S. plant in Normal, Illinois. The site churns out the R1T and R1S right now, and the company expects to make about 57,000 examples this year. But it's boosting that capacity to 215,000 units. Those new models include the anticipated midsize R2 SUV, but Rivian also had a bit of a shocker with a slightly smaller R3 model. Both vehicles have the same lighting signature as its current EVs, and the R2 looks more like a baby version of the R1S. But the rear-end treatment of the R3 is completely different, which we think looks more like an old European hatchback like the Volkswagen Golf. Rivian is utilizing a new platform for these models that takes advantage of an all-new 4695 battery cell that will provide over 300 miles or 482 kilometers of range. That's for versions with the bigger pack, which will also be able to do 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. It's not giving any estimates for the small battery, but Rivian does say the R2 will start at around $45,000 and that the R3 will be priced below that. Other highlights include the NACS connector installed right into the vehicle, and Rivian says they'll have, quote, dramatically enhanced autonomous capabilities. While the company is taking $100 refundable deposits for the R2 today, it's not starting production until the first half of 2026. Well, it looks like they just can't help themselves. Remember how COVID and the chip shortage led to a drop in production that led to tight inventory, that pushed up prices, that led to record profits? And remember how automakers said they would maintain production discipline and never let inventory levels go back to where they were before? Well, you and I remember, but apparently the car companies don't. According to Cox Automotive, there are now 2.8 million vehicles sitting on dealer lots or waiting in marshaling yards to get shipped. That's 1 million more than there were at this time last year, and it translates to a 78-day supply. The good news is that this means there's plenty of product for car buyers to shop for, and that we'll see more sales incentives to move the metal. The bad news for automakers is this will hurt their margins. Except for Tesla, EV startups in the US are all struggling right now, and there's a similar story going on in China. NIO and XPeng are having trouble selling cars and are losing money. But Huawei, the giant cell phone company that makes cars under the Auto brand, is rocketing up the sales chart. To give you an idea of how well it's doing, last month Tesla sold, not made, but sold 30,000 cars in China, while Huawei sold 21,000. And Huawei is just getting going. But it's kind of hard to figure out what's really going on in the car market in China right now. Sales plummeted in February because of the Chinese New Year holidays, but they were also down in January, and we probably won't have a clear idea of how things are going until we can compare the first quarter of this year to the same time period from last year. Tesla owners who filed a class action lawsuit against the company accusing it of falsely advertising vehicle ranges have to find another avenue to seek damages. The California judge that made the ruling said the owners must go through individual arbitration with the automaker instead of the class action lawsuit because they had agreed to an arbitration process to resolve disputes when they bought their vehicle. The owners claim that Tesla misled them by overstating how far its vehicles can drive on a single charge, and they say the driving ranges on the vehicle's dashboard were inaccurate. Tesla says the claims don't have any merit, but it's not completely off the hook. The judge didn't rule on the merit of the claims and didn't dismiss the lawsuits. and says an injunction can be filed against Tesla if owners win their arbitration cases. Last week, it was revealed that Apple canceled development of its electric vehicle, and now Bloomberg is reporting some really interesting details about it. The biggest revelation was that Apple had discussions with Mercedes, Ford, BMW, Volkswagen, Tesla, Canoo, and McLaren about partnering up, but ultimately, it decided to build the EV on its own. Called Project Titan, Apple spent about $1 billion a year on the program, which was launched in 2014. But it never got to the point of testing vehicles on public roads. The company had planned to launch the vehicle in 2020, but by that year, it was still at least 5 years from being production ready, and its price tag was higher than anticipated. Apple originally wanted to sell the EV for $85,000, but estimates put the cost of production at $120,000. One other interesting tidbit not related to the EV project that Bloomberg reported is that then CEO Steve Jobs proposed buying General Motors in 2008 when the company was going through bankruptcy. There's a lot of talk about Chinese EVs flooding the EU car market, but MG, which is owned by SAIC, says it's aiming to take on the small hybrid segment in Europe. MG's head of sales in Europe told Automotive News that, quote, "We aim to break the monopoly of hybridization in Europe." By that, he means MG is going after Toyota and Renault, which control 86% of the small hybrid segment in the region. MG is launching the MG3 this summer to take on the Toyota Yaris and the Renault Clio hybrids. The MG3 will start at less than 20,000 euros, which is around 4,000 euros cheaper than the Yaris and Clio. MG says it expects to sell more than 300,000 vehicles this year in Europe thanks to the MG3. Last year, it sold just over 231,000 vehicles, which was double the year before. With one of the fastest EVs that you can buy, the CEO of Rimac knows a thing or two about electric performance, and he thinks it's actually possible for the new Tesla Roadster to hit Elon Musk's claimed sub-1 second 0 to 60 time. But Mate Rimac says it comes with a lot of downsides as well. His team has done the simulations, and with thrusters, it is possible to go from 0 to 60 in under a second. But it also requires extra tanks, compressors, valves, nozzles, and the EV needs massive motors, inverters, gearboxes, and drive shafts. So you'd be carrying around a lot of extra mass most of the time. It's going to be interesting to see what Tesla has in store for its end-of-year reveal, as long as it's not delayed again. Several new EVs are launching. We've reported on all these models in the past, so we're going to go through them kind of quickly. Volkswagen is kicking off sales of the new station wagon version of the ID.7 in Germany. It will carry a starting price of a little under 55,000 euros. Honda says both the Prologue and Acura ZDX will qualify for the full EV tax credit in the U.S., with delivery starting within the next couple of weeks. Before those incentives, the Prologue starts at $47,400, while the ZDX starts at $64,500. And lastly, the Nismo version of the Aria, which has up to 320 kilowatts or nearly 430 horsepower, is now going on sale. Unfortunately, we only know of it being sold in Japan for now, where it has a starting price of about $57,000. Affordability of new cars is one of the biggest issues in the auto industry. Everyone is complaining about how expensive cars are. So how can automakers find new ways to cut costs? That was the topic on Autoline After Hours yesterday. And Chris Thomas, now a consultant to automakers, pointed out that generative AI is already starting to have a big impact.
Generative AI is probably going to make as big a difference in the auto industry as computer-aided design did, right? Going from drafting tables to designing on the tube, and it's probably as big as the internet, as big as those two things combined, okay? I know suppliers today who are using generative AI to do quotes. So it used to be an OEM puts out a request for quote, and a sales guy will spend 3 days putting together a quote.
A mountain of paperwork.
Well,
your pencil.
and then he goes to his boss, and there's a bunch of stuff wrong, and he goes back and forth, and 3 weeks later they come up with this quote. Well, now generative AI, you can point to the last 300 quotes you've done that went out the door, and say, do a quote for company X at this volume for this part, given, and it'll be made in this plant. And generative AI will take everything that's been taken into account in the past and do that quote, and it'll be 99% right in 10 seconds.
Wow.
Right? So think about all the improvements that are going to be made through the supply chain. That's just there's so many places it's going to be used.
You can watch that entire show right now on our website and YouTube channel. And while the conversation goes all over the place, there's some great insight into how the auto industry will work on ways to make cars more affordable. But that's the end of this show and this week. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope that you have a great weekend.
Autoline Daily is brought to you by Bridgestone, solutions for your journey, and by Intrepid Control Systems, over-the-air engineering. Boost your game. We want to know what drives your testing. OTA, connected car, diagnostics, remote testing. Intrepid Control Systems is here to help you work from anywhere. Intrepid Control Systems, driven by your data. Wards is the industry leader for news, data, and analysis. That's why companies across the globe subscribe to our premium service, maybe even your own. Log in for subscriber access now. Check your company's intranet for details, and rely on wardsauto.com to keep you informed.